go over half guard, and we're going to focus on bottom half guard specifically for this. And the idea being in this whole setup, again, using some of the stuff that I've previously gone over. If you follow anything on my channel, we want to try to simplify this as much as possible, and we're really going to emphasize that near hip to at least set up. I've removed the audio from this other video so that way I can pause it and kind of talk over it as well. But again, if you train with me or you train under me, we understand that realistically when this thing breaks down, we're going to look at a near hip far shoulder, and we're really going to focus on what's kind of going on in a neutral game. And if you have questions about that, feel free to look at my website and look at some of that stuff on there again, because that's where you'll find a lot more of that other stuff that's kind of, you know, people are now starting to pick up on and starting to try to do, but you know where it's coming from first. So that being said, now when we're looking at this, you're going to have Camp and John. He's going to stay on his side. And I wanted to pause the video and talk over it in the beginning because some of the grips that Camp's going to make in this video, for the initial demonstration, we just filmed this under very quickly. He's going to make like a finger grip into the sleeve, which again, for most tournaments, it's not going to be legal. So you're going to want to use a pistol grip. You're going to want to use hooking around the sleeve, anything along those kind of lines to be able to set that up. Okay. So that being said, I'm going to start playing this video. And what we're really going to emphasize here is really, first things first, we don't want to get flattened out in half guard. And we're going to go here and we're going to look at Camp. You know, he's got an underhook. You know, I get people like to really focus on trying to go for the underhook on bottom, you know, half guard, and it really works as long as you take the proper angle on the path of going from the near hip, which is currently would be his right hip, to John's far shoulder, which would be his left arm. So that way you could start to look to, you know, attack the back if he doesn't have a whizzer or anything else. So that being said, John being smart about this, he starts to establish, you know, that whizzer to block that off, which also allows, you know, him a little bit more option and control. You're going to see that Camp initially for the first sweep here is able to get him off balance enough and be able to dive underneath the leg, and that works really well. We have to remember though that, you know, the typical counter to this is going to be the person either posturing their weight back as much as possible or even backstepping the leg to try to put you more on a low shoulder as well, right? So that's where we have to understand in this basic game, the hip that we're controlling is the hip that he needs to pass guard. The opposite joint is realistically, with an opposing amount of force, the next thing that we really need to try to address in this kind of position. All right. So that other leg, while giving him a base, relatively speaking, if I were to draw a triangle through this, you're not really going to, you know, he really doesn't have a lot of weight back on that. So the nice thing that is being able to be set up from here is that as long as John still has this control, that one arm is tied up. So if Camp can't dive underneath and he can't get anything else to be set up, he can then start to get to this sleeve and this, you know, his left arm, or John's left arm. The reason being with that, if he starts to grab at that sleeve, like John's knowing that he's going to try to flatten that out, if John goes to grab at that sleeve, that's going to take away Camp's pace. Well, if Camp actually goes to grab at this sleeve, the next part about this is Camp really needs to bring this arm towards him. Specifically, it's almost like you're going to invite doing a cross face, bringing that arm across. As he goes to do that, you're going to be able to see here when he, you know, brings that arm towards his body, more so towards his head. Realistically, what's going to happen, he has control of that sleeve because he has a tight bite on John's right hip. All he needs to do is point his knees the opposite way, and John gets swept. So the nice thing about this is this starts to invite some of these other interesting kind of positions, right? So, you know, I wanted to just go back here for 1 second so that way you can see this. it almost looks like if Camp doesn't have control of John's head or his arm, John could essentially cross-face him. Realistically, John's best path here of attacks, it's either going to be an asymmetrical sliding choke when he's in top half guard, a Kimura trap, a guillotine throw, an arm-in guillotine kind of throw. You can set to go for a spiral armbar, or he's going to backstep. Because realistically, in that position, he's going to end up being kind of locked out. He already has control of Camp's, far shoulder per se, because all of his weight's on top of it. But by Camp having this position of his arm, John effectively has no base. That left leg to John means absolutely nothing, because Camp has such a bite on his right hip, and John's left arm is pretty much taken away. It doesn't matter what John does, because if for any reason he completely sold out on blocking that roll to the opposite side, Camp could literally just drive forward towards John's left arm, more so his left shoulder, and he would be able to sweep to the same side too. So now let's go back forward again. So again, just as another demonstration, he's got like that pistol grip setup. He's got a really good control of that hip, again, near hip, far shoulder. Because again, that arm, more specifically, John's left arm in this, is what he would ultimately need to do to start to secure some other type of control of Camp. He needs to use that to either, if he wants to mitigate it in the neutral game, pull out Camp's right sleeve or his right arm, or he's going to go ahead and start to attack either a crossface or some kind of head-arm control, or more so a Kimura trap of that left shoulder, or more specifically Camp's. But Camp right now has a belt grip, which can be a strong grip. Ideally, from there, he's really focused on choking down John's right hip, and you can specifically see now that when John's arm is being brought more towards Camp's head, and it will end up more even almost in line with Camp's left shoulder, John effectively has no way to base post whatever. You'll see that his weight is off balance on his left leg, and makes it very easy for the sweep the opposite way. Let's speed it through just a couple other examples so that way you can see it. So the nice thing about this too is that you're able to set these things up. So if the person tries to, base away, like if you would normally dive under for a sweep and go underneath the leg, this is an example here where we're really illustrating what's keeping John at home. John could either posture up or he could backstep, right? But the nice thing about this whole set is that if you have that sleeve grip, and again, I know Camp is not demonstrating the ideal grip for a tournament, grip. I would say use a pistol grip, or just hooking around the sleeve, anything along those lines. You don't want to have a deep grip, more shoulder or elbow height to start. The reason being is that you really just want to start by getting the sleeve if you have a really tight choke on the hip. It still shows that John's base is limited, coming back up. John's going to try to backstep, and even when he backsteps, you're going to see that his position is pretty much compromised at that point. That left leg can backstep, but again, the majority of his weight is still on that right leg. If I were to remove Camp from this photo, John's base is rotating backwards, but his upper body is rotated towards and towards Camp. So it pretty much gives him no base of support over this. Realistically, at that point, the phrase that if you train with us long enough or train under me, with this, you'll understand we talk about not only neutral game, but whiffing and then punishing him. Well, at this point, any move that John makes from here establishes a whiff, which allows, Camp to start to punish. The bare minimum of, the punish will be the actual sweep. So the nice thing about this, again, now we're just kind of showing along these kind of lines here, how do you start to set some of these things up, right? So you can actually, again, we go for the underhook. John mitigates it by either going whizzer or overhook, right? Being smart so that way he's not giving up the back right off, from there. Because Camp kept the underhook and he went from the near hip and reaching his underhook towards the far shoulder, it would increase, the possibility of bumping John away and allowing for the back take, from that setup. But what's the person more often not going to do? They're actually going to base out and posture pretty well, out of this because, that pretty much, allows them to not get swept, especially if we dive under that for that leg. So this is now when you could start, start throwing little other kind of things to misdirect, or even if you go to set this up. So for example, you're going to see here, Camp's going to, start to dive for the leg, but look, John just starts sliding it back. When he goes to slide that back, though, that weight's on, still on his near hip, which would be his right leg, but you'll see that John's left arm is down, okay? So the weight distribution here is near hip, far shoulder, which now makes the secondary target for this going to be some kind of sleeve grip or some kind of arm control, at least to get on the board and be able to go from here. Again, I was saying grabbing lower if you have a really tight bite on the hip, but if the person's starting to move away, you can start to mitigate that and go more towards the elbow along the lines. Would a same side lapel, or like taking, in this case, Camp's right hand towards John's left lapel work? Not necessarily as good because, again, we want to have that cross-directional control. From here, he grabs that, and you're going to see as soon as he starts to bring that arm towards Camp's head, more so once it's towards his head, which would be the equivalent of what John would want to try to do, whether it's a crossface or at least start to attack from there if he really wanted to crossface. Once that arm is up, you'll see again, right as I paused it, John has no way to base from here. The arm is too far away. It's already in line of Camp's head. If I were to draw two parallel lines following the idea for John about being in the middle of the hip and the shoulder, his left arm is away from the middle. Camp has the belt grip. Again, the belt grip here is just to help kind of control, in conjunction with that real good tight near pinch of the hip. But that left leg is doing absolutely nothing for John. From here, John gets swept, and the bare minimum is getting swept. From there, there are some other options, from that as well. But again, so that's just one, nice little way of setting these kind of things up, where as you're trying to now play half guard, what do I need to do? Do I need to get, an underhook? Do I need to get an overhook? What do I need to do? Well, first things first, you don't want to get flattened out. Second, and the next important thing is that near hip. All right, so he needs that near hip to pass. You need that near hip to play guard. So as long as you start to control that and start to understand the angles, and you understand from there, the secondary thing would be that far shoulder. Right? If your guard's starting to get past, we wouldn't want John's left arm to get to your head, so that's why we were 2-on-1, shrimp away, and at least be able to recover guard. So by Camp staying on his side, kind of turtling up, ideally you would want to have your hands in a better position. You would want to have them up so that way they're in the middle, more so probably in the box, so that way you can defend any kind of choke, or if he's really trying to establish a really tight arm control. But again, for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just trying to show you how this can kind of play out. This is still technically, even though they're on top of each other, this is, you could say, a much tighter version of neutral game, because we're trying to figure out who can we make with, in this whole kind of grip kind of control, and then from there, how bad can we punish him, right? Well, again, Camp staying on the side made John immediately whiff. And why is that? Because you'll see John's really either trying to commit, to either starting to flatten out or control Camp's top arm. Well, as soon as that's happening, you're going to see that Camp's at least getting set to control that far arm, far shoulder. The probability of Camp successfully getting a sweep in a better position has gone up, more so specifically based off of can John whiff. How's John going to whiff? Well, John will whiff by doing anything other than really trying to reset this thing back into neutral, putting this thing back into position, and also really, kind of addressing the immediate thing. Either creating a little space of that near hip, or controlling the near hip a little bit better, or controlling that far shoulder. Well, and how does this work from here? you can already see Camp is now bringing that arm towards his head. But as he gets stretched out, and he pulls that, you'll see that John has no weight on that leg. How do you know that there's no weight? Because his hips and his body is starting to move forward. Otherwise, you'd see that sitting back. You know, at this point, obviously, if you start putting more speed behind it, whatever else, all Camp needs to do is just point his legs the opposite way, sweeps going on, right? So, you know, when you're playing half guard, what's the most important thing? Well, again, don't get flattened out. Second, control that near hip, because realistically, what's going to happen, right? Like here, you know, do I want a Z shield? Do I want a shin shield? Do I want to play butterfly half? Do I want to play what you're comfortable with and take what the person gives you, right? Do I need an overhook? Do I need an underhook? Well, what you need is not to get flattened out and get your guard passed. I don't care what you do at that point, but do something that's going to increase your probability. So the more you can stay on your side, stay compact, keep everything out in front of you, and force the other person to do something in the neutral game that's going to essentially force them to whiff, and you can punish them outright on that, then you're going to take that every single day of the week. Again, it's as simple as soon as Camp brings that arm forward, John's already getting off balance and sweat. So again, there are many different sweeps. There's many different things we can do. Again, we can even, you know, we can dive under almost like for our simple, you know, single leg sweep, foot grab sweep, everything else. It's typically one of the first sweeps that we're going to go over with people. You know, and one of the other things I really like to be able to do is focus on when you get flattened out. You know, how do we get back? Well, we do that kind of helicopter kind of sweep if we can immediately get it. If not, they drive back in. We do the John Wayne sweep. We go from there. And, you know, that natural progression of that game back and forward will play. But again, this is just something, you know, I wanted you to see that in conjunction with that, the minute you're able to off-balance somebody with that, you stay disciplined to be able to stand that near hip, there you go from there. So that essentially, if you want to put it this way, you know, is the ELI 5 kind of version of the sweep for half guard. Make sure, you know, watch it. If you have any questions, leave a comment or emoji, and you know, we'll go from there.